Alex Jones went on a rant about how 5G was dangerous. There were some studies, there was one that was published in the LA Times, I believe, saying that 5G led to 5G exposure led to increased tumor probability in rats. Although Alex Jones went on to rant about human cow hybrids or something, I had no idea what he was talking about. It apparently is very dangerous. There are a lot of shortcomings to 5G that are apparently being overlooked and pushed away because we have a massive race between all these companies to roll out 5th generation cellular technology. Gotta admit, I've seen a video of 5G and it is amazing. 500 megabits down in Chicago. I'd love to get 5G, but we have this story from The Verge. 5G could mean less time to flee a deadly hurricane. Heads of NASA and NOAA warn. They're suggesting people could die because we won't have enough evacuation time. While it's certainly not the story that Alex Jones was pushing, I still think it's interesting to point out that for a while now, people have been claiming anyone talking about 5G being dangerous, it's a conspiracy theory until the government said so, and now it's not. So before we get into the story, check out timcast.com/donate if you'd like to support my work. There's a monthly donation option, a cryptocurrency option, and a physical address. Or you can just share this video, click the like button, comment below, because your engagement with it tells YouTube it's great. Sharing it is really, really great because it's not that people are going to click it later. It's that when it gets a share, YouTube says, oh, it's shared. We'll show it more for you. So it's really, really good. But back to the story. The Verge writes, it's become increasingly clear the wireless industry is trying to push the idea of speedy 5G wireless networks before the technology is actually ready. It's a race, and the race is BS. But until today, we hadn't realized that people's lives might also be at stake. As reported by the Washington Post and CNET, the heads of NASA and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration warn the issue could set back the world's weather forecasting abilities by 40 years, reducing our ability to predict the path of deadly hurricanes and the amount of time available to evacuate. It's because one of the key wireless frequencies earmarked for speedy 5G millimeter wave networks, the 24 gigahertz band, happens to be very close to the frequencies used by microwave satellites to observe water vapor and detect those changes in the weather. They have the potential to interfere, and according to NASA and NOAA testimony, they could interfere to the point that it delays preparation for extreme weather events. So you pick. Do you want gigabit cell phones, or do you want to know when the storm's coming to end the life of you and your family? Last week, acting NOAA head Dr. Neil Jacobs told the House Subcommittee on the Environment that based on the current 5G rollout plan, our satellites would lose approximately 77% of the data they're currently collecting, reducing our forecast ability by as much as 30%. I wonder if there's a way to appropriate 5G, however, from the actual cell towers to collect that data for you. Maybe it's not possible because I don't exactly know how you're using the data, but maybe it's about changing the way we do the microwave readings. If you looked back in time to see when our forecast skill was 30% less than today, it's somewhere around 1980. This would result in the reduction of hurricane track forecast lead times by roughly 2 to 3 days. If we hadn't had that data, Jacobs added, we wouldn't have been able to predict that the deadly Hurricane Sandy would hit. A European study showed that with 77% less data, the model would have predicted the storm staying out at sea instead of making landfall. Jacobs said later that we currently have no other technologies to passively observe water vapor and make these more accurate predictions. On April 19th, NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine made similar comments to the House Science Subcommittee. That part of the electromagnetic spectrum is necessary to make predictions as to where a hurricane is going to make landfall, he told the committee. If you can't make that prediction accurately, then you end up not evacuating the right people and/or you evacuate people that don't need to evacuate, which is a problem. I will stress, ultimately, we can't just get angry that new technologies are emerging. We need to continually innovate. Perhaps the solution to this problem, I'm not saying they're not implying this, isn't so much to stop 5G, but to figure out better ways to track water vapor. If the issue is that we want to track potential storms to save lives, then I don't think we should be restricting the development of new technologies because old ones might be interfered with. Do you guys remember when they switched off analog and everyone went digital? It was like, 12 or 13 years ago or something? All of the TVs used to operate on analog radio frequencies, and it switched to digital to save bandwidth. Perhaps the issue here is not 5G, but that we need to update. We need new technology in tracking water vapor, plain and simple. I don't like the idea of restricting technologies, especially communication technology, simply because old technology wouldn't work properly. None of this should be a surprise to the industry or the FCC, as experts have been debating this point for years in the build-up to 5G. In fact, recent versions of the 3GPP's 5G NR specification specifically have a carve-out to protect satellite weather services by reducing the emission levels of neighboring 5G signals between 24.25 and 27.5 gigahertz. It's under 6.5.3.2.2 additional spurious emission requirements. That is, I don't know what that means. But the NOAA is arguing the current emission requirements aren't enough. It'll lose that critical data unless they're clamped down even further. I'm optimistic that we can come up with an elegant solution where passive microwave sensing and 5G can coexist. The FCC has definitely been warned. By the way, Space News reported, we'll open this one, that NASA's Bridenstine and Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross sent a letter to the FCC Chairman Ajit Pai to discuss protections on February 28th, a couple weeks before the FCC started auctioning off 24 gigahertz spectrum on March 14th. But that Pai rejected the invitation, claiming there was no technical basis for an objection. So I guess there's an interesting point to be brought up with, like, Alex Jones, for instance. You know, he's been waving his arms in the air and shrieking about weird things and mutations coming from 5G. And I think that's a little off, and maybe you could argue is distracting from the real potential threats of 5G technology. But I also have to say, while people like Jones and others were saying 5G is dangerous, they were being called conspiracy theorists, and this issue was being ignored by the mainstream media. So which is worse? Overly, like, you could argue that, hey, at least with Jones, if some people listen to that nonsense, they might look into it and be concerned. Or you could say, people will look into it, assume he's full of it, and then not look into it at all, right? I guess the issue is, when it comes to digital media, Facebook, etc., there's this big controversy over fake news and what should be allowed and what shouldn't be allowed. One of the biggest arguments I've made is that if you restrict individuals from posting news under the guise of preventing fake news, what happens when someone breaks something really, really important? I'm excited for 5G. I actually got a 5G phone, not because I plan to use it, it's not rolling out anytime soon, but because I needed to upgrade my phone anyway, and I'm stoked for when it's going to come out. I have to upload multiple videos per day, and each video is around a gigabyte. So that's not an easy thing to do on your average phone right now, but with the new 5G technology, it's going to be epic. But the point is, besides me using 5G, should people be allowed to talk about these issues, or should there be some kind of restrictions? Or can we simultaneously say The Verge is a conspiracy theorist? This is conspiracy nonsense coming from The Verge, citing some random government people who don't know what they're talking about. Or do we, why do we just assume the government is telling the truth or they're right all the time? That's another big issue I have with modern journalism today. The government said it must be true. Other people on YouTube complained about it, no, but that was a conspiracy. And then what happens when the government says it's true? Now you just believe it? To me, that's absurd. Senators Ron Wyden and Maria Cantwell sent a letter to Pai on May 13th as well. To continue down the path the FCC is currently on, to continue to ignore the serious alarms the scientific community is raising could lead to dangerous impacts to American national security, to American industries, and the American people, they warned, asking Pai not to award any final 24 gigahertz licenses or allow carriers to operate in the 24 gigahertz band until it can protect satellite measurements in the way that NASA and NOAA believe they need to be protected. Earlier this week, the Wireless Industry Trade Association tried to ridicule these requests as fake news. That's the point I'm making. By publishing an argument about how the scientific community's claims relied on 13-year-old weather sensors that was never actually used. That was quickly rebutted by meteorologist Jordan Girth, who pointed out on Twitter that a different 23.8 gigahertz sensor, the JPSS, replaced it. We haven't yet seen the study ourselves to confirm whether the CTIA is correct that the study relied on the older sensor and whether the new one would make the difference, but a spokesperson argues that the newer sensor is less sensitive to interference from 5G signals. Well, hold on there a second, buddy. The Verge hasn't actually confirmed themselves. Well, perhaps this whole issue is The Verge publishing nonsensical conspiracy theories then, right? This is one of the biggest problems I have with the media today. How they accuse people on YouTube of publishing fake news, of Facebook, it's all fake news. They say independent creators are fake news, and then they themselves don't actually confirm the data. So is it fair to point out The Verge is publishing conspiracy nonsense in the same way they do to us? Yes, absolutely. But let's be real. NASA and NOAA are saying we've got potential risks here, so I'm going to defer to that, right? This is why I think it's important not to outright dismiss independent creators. At any rate, I think the story around 5G was interesting enough to warrant its own segment, mostly because when I saw the story, I thought to myself, like, weren't they just calling this a conspiracy theory? Now they're actually saying, oh no, 5G. So, whatever. Also, I'll admit, I'm a huge cell phone technology nerd because I've done so much on-the-ground reporting and live streaming that I regularly track the new developments in cell tech. And we'll see what happens. But thanks for hanging out. New videos every day starting at 10 a.m. youtube.com/timcast. You can support my work at timcast.com/donate. For those that are listening on the podcast, leave a good review. It's greatly appreciated. And we'll leave it there. I'll see you all next time.